Hello everyone and welcome back to Star Wars Loose Canon. My name is Chris Higgins, joined again by the Brothers Krynn. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good.
I'm good, except for the fact that I'm sitting next to Daniel. I'm joking.
Oh, jeez. I mean, Daniel, will you keep your hands to yourself for once?
Ouch. And he keeps picking on me and looking at me.
Well, it's Joe that started it.
That's
okay,
true.
yes, I did.
That's the only thing that matters is who started it. I agree. Joe, cut it out.
I will. Okay. Well,
we are part 8 now. Part 8 of the Kenobi timeline. I mean,
Wolf.
Guys, this is quite the saga.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to end it at 9. Okay, so here we go. So I believe last time we covered everything up to what? Jedi... Oh, right. We had the Lorian Kenobi's great moment of victory and the Darth Sacrelios lady who's spits in his face and rejects his redemption and his act of kindness. Now, here's where we're going to have to make it clear. One of the few differences is that we are actually kind of putting the New Republic on stronger footing than it is arguably in either of the sequel timelines. Because we kept one of the triumvirates, or at least 2 of them, actually. One of them has a very diminished empire. Qui-Gon lost his. And the last one, Neva Croan, she had one of the daughters of Palpatine within her grasp. And she, of course, crowned this daughter Empress when Palpatine died. But the thing is, Neva did form a quick alliance with the Jedi because, well, they had firm footing in Enderan with Olivia and Rock. So she kind of saw it as she's kind of semi-surrounded. And because Vader and the Sith... After Qui-Gon's political fall, she kind of realized she's vulnerable. So she's either with the Sith or the Jedi. And she didn't fully understand the differences. So, she's one of those Jedi normies who doesn't fully grasp the difference, but chooses the side that seems most convenient politically. And also to her survival and her charge's survival. Because the idea was that the princess she took in and crowned was the daughter of her deceased best friend, who was one of Palpatine's harem members. So Neva is someone who crowns this little girl Empress, and this little girl Ishara would end up basically being the second Empress, but it's of an Imperial remnant, but it's the largest Imperial remnant. And Neva guards her territories very jealously, but arguably her fleets were the least affected of all the military fleets of the galaxy, because none of the fighting really took hold in her backyard, and she stayed in reserve. She did not participate in the fighting at Enderan, Coruscant, or anywhere else, and the only New Republic excursion against her, she rebuffed and slaughtered, and because she is a good military genius. And she had the support from a variety of mercenaries and Imperial officials who fled to her. Because by crowning an Empress after Palpatine's death, that gave her a bit of a legitimacy. And because she has the Spaceport 88 Alliance, which is arguably the most important commercial hub in the galaxy, she's sitting on basically the economy and all trade, or like a third of all trade, because a third of the trade goes through the Kashyyyk Trandoshia system, another third pretty much goes through Onderon, and another third goes through the Spaceport 88 Alliance, which is the fastest route from outer to inner rim and core. So because it's it's the most important thing in the mid rim, and the mid rim is the most important space sector in the entire Star Wars galaxy. But Neva, because of the Sith's comportment after Palpatine's fall, quickly, and because there's attacks on her Imperial remnant because she's nervous about both sides, she takes the Republic side. And the New Republic, in turn, realizing this is where we wanted to show Mon Mothma as actually having a brain between her ears. Mon Mothma quickly realizes, I can't actually stomp this woman out. Not because if I turn on her, she'll side with the other Imperial Remnant, and I'll be crushed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring her to my side against the Sith, against the other Imperial Remnants, and I'll push back, and in return, she has to acknowledge that the core belongs to the Republic. So while she's like, we recognize you as the successor to the Galactic Empire, with your Empress, but in turn you must recognize us. But one of the concessions that's made is this Force-sensitive little girl has to have a Jedi tutor. Where this is where the idea is that Leia helped arrange this, and Leia was being crafty. And Neva, though very smart, kind of walks into the rake here, not realizing, she kind of realizes, but kind of sees it as like, what's the harm? Not fully cognizant that a Jedi tutor will certainly, train the little girl in some Jedi arts and the Force. But in turn, Neva has as a concession, she demands that a Jedi temple be built on Junction 5. So that, she has direct contact to the Jedi. And the Jedi have a vested interest in her and the Empress alongside the New Republic. So the Jedi are now bound to both governments and are in some capacity. And this is where the idea of a secondary temple on this large city planet in the Mid-Rim is a concession that the Jedi agree to readily, but in return they can't actually fund it because they don't really have a lot of money these days. And the idea is that this would be a minor academy, well, not academy, but like you're going to have a Jedi temple on Enderan on Junction 5. So that's one on the Outer Rim, one on the Mid-Rim, and one in the core, and you have Yavin 4. So, and you have, of course, Coruscant. So Ferrus Olin, we decided, would become the Grand Master. So that's one change we made. Luke is not yet Grand Master. He is Master of Ceremonies like Mace Windu. And the idea was that the only reason to be Ferrus is because the Jedi would naturally follow him, because it's his order, his Jedi cult that's, got the closest connection to the old order. And Ferrus is someone who has a more direct connection to the old council than Luke ever did, because of, he's the apprentice of Siri Tachi and also Obi-Wan Kenobi himself. And he's basically the adoptive son of both. And on top of that, he was the one who kept the fight going for 20 years. Whereas Luke is basically a grandson of the council in a way. But Luke is also the son of the traitor on the council, Anakin. So that kind of delegitimizes a little. And this is where we were thinking Ferrus would basically take over. But the thing is, because it's his order, really, and all the little Jedi cults are going to band together like they did in the actual timeline, but a lot of them didn't join Luke. A lot of them were reticent, and you can't, at first. But we're proposing they aren't this time. So the Jedi Order is on slightly more solid footing early on, because Ferrus is at the helm. Naturally, though, Kyle Katarn, for example, will go to Luke. That does not change. Luke steps up as a leader, because he's Master of Ceremonies. And Luke is the one put in charge of Yavin 4 to, train that academy, as it's his brainchild, his idea, and his energy is pouring into the place. Ferrus is going to be managing things like Yoda on Coruscant. And the idea we had was Lorian Kenobi, for his part, is positioned on Junction 5 to help manage the politics there and tutor Ishara. And the reason a Kenobi like him is chosen is because Qui-Gon is too impulsive, and Ferrus wants him close, because Ferrus and Qui-Gon are very close, personally. And Lorian is considered the more level-headed and calmer and more Obi-Wan-like of the two brothers. Whereas Qui-Gon is more like Mace Windu. He's competent, but he's headstrong, and if he thinks, well, I'm going to do this, he's not going to consult with the council or with Ferrus. He's just going to do it. And so Ferrus has the same kind of personality. So the idea is, Qui-Gon's going to go out into the galaxy and basically arbitrate, negotiate, and bully whoever they need to join this coalition. And of course, Lorian's going to supervise things on Junction 5 alongside Bo and Skywalker. And of course, you have Rock, who ends up over on Enderan. But Rock and Oberon soon go missing because they end up chasing one ship because they discover that Withern's medallion has survived and that someone is claiming to be Darth Withern. So they pursue him a bit into the former Sith space, crash land on a planet called Septara, and proceed to discover some of the Sith race that's survived since 5,000 years ago. And the idea here was this was a race of a group of Sith that, they have a predilection for the dark side. But the thing is, the two brothers soon discover that some of the local... There are smugglers and scoundrels who've crash landed on the planet before. And the thing is, Withern had discovered the planet and wanted to corrupt them all over again. Because, and absorb them into himself, because he's a greedy glutton. And, of course, the twins would save the day. But this is where Oberon would get the idea, let's try redeeming these people, rather than condemning them, so that, let's not teach them too much about the outside galaxy, but let's start constructing a bit, let's start sending some Jedi teachers here to educate these people in the light side. Because, they're very strong in the Force. So let's see if we can temper their ideas and whatnot and start dripping them into the light. So, a few Jedi artifacts are sent and Oberon's supervising this project and whatnot. While Rock, goes back to Enderan to enjoy married life, but also supervised the Jedi Academy there. And, of course, the galaxy starts to change. One of the first missions that, for example, Qui-Gon Kenobi decides to take on is that of Trandosha. So he goes to Trandosha to try to get Trandosha to join the New Republic, an Imperial Remnant that's on the Republic side. And the thing is, the Senate had decided they wanted to bombard Trandosha. It was our idea. Qui-Gon would rush in saying, you can't. I'm going to try redeeming these people. And he comes in and has to battle in their kind of battle arena. He wins, but he had to do it without a lightsaber because the Trandoshans are like, that's cheating. So he wins and saves one of their elders from a group of Wookiees, because we decided that one mini-story should have a Wookiee as a villain. And Qui-Gon is then celebrated by the Trandoshans, and Qui-Gon convinces them to join the Senate, and with Ferris and Leia's help, they decide that Trandoshan and Kashyyyk should have separate senators. Because in the older Republic, Kashyyyk generally represented both planets, and the Wookiees really profited, while the Trandoshans suffered. It's why the Trandoshans didn't like the Wookiees, to a limited extent, at least as far as we understand. And yeah, there's a whole hunting thing, they hunt each other, it's common, and Trandoshans are slavers. Yes, we know. But there's also an element of political injustice here, so Qui-Gon balances the scales. And, as for, let's say, Viera, she decides that, on her part, because Neimoidians, she fixes the Neimoidian problems, because the Imperial Remnant does have access to Neimoidian support. The Neimoidians have actually a food shortage, and Newt Gunray had been using this to dominate the Neimoidia space sectors. And it is Viera who decides to coordinate with the Imperial Remnant that's on the Republic side, and with Ethor, the Ithorians, to try to feed the Neimoidians on condition that the Neimoidians, because they do have some during the Imperial period, they weren't exactly wealthy because Palpatine didn't like them. But from what we've seen of the Clone Wars, they were a manufacturing powerhouse. And they are very good merchants and diplomats. So, you bring them over. So the idea was that we kind of expand on what Mothma and Leia were trying to do with restructuring the New Republic, getting more in depth into it. So all of that gets done. So each of our Jedi characters are basically running around the galaxy trying to solve problems like this. So that because the Republic also has an Imperial remnant on their side, they have that military. And, like the 339th Legion that had survived, and some of the spare clone legions that had survived, thanks to Muln, had joined that one Imperial remnant. So Neva bolstered her military with these original Jango Fett clones. But then the idea was that the 501st remnants, rather than being hunted down like in the canon, Qui-Gon and Vieira would go out of their way to try to protect them, same with Luke, and basically they're railroaded over to the Imperial remnant. This, combined with the Mandalorians, causes the Mandalorian siding with the Republic and the Imperial remnant in question, kind of means that now the military is stronger on the heroic side, on the Jedi side. But this brings up the issue of the Dark Empire thing with Palpatine. We were thinking it goes down basically almost the same. Only difference is, Leia goes in to save Luke, but she's a little more desperate because Qui-Gon has decided, though Luke's a friend, he's going to go in and kill Luke because you've turned to the dark side, so I will kill you. I don't do redemption. I kill Sith. But that's where, in turn, now we get into the Thrawn trilogy. Thrawn only had like 5-6 ships, and since we didn't feel like contradicting that, he still only has 5 or 6 ships, and he's still trying to take over the galaxy. But it's ultimately far less successful because the idea was that Qui-Gon goes in himself alongside Vieira and Rock, and the three of them basically just slaughter his entire ship crew and slaughter him before he could really bombard too many planets. And the problem is Force Unleashed and Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Jedi Academy show that a single Jedi could basically take down a capital ship with no effort. So the problem with the Thrawn trilogy is it makes no sense in terms of the lore and the power levels. So it's like, all right, we're sending Yajirobe to fight Majin Buu, and Majin Buu's afraid of Yajirobe. Why the hell would he be afraid? So like our idea was Mon Mothma basically just decides, yeah, I'll just send in like 3 Jedi and kill this man for me. Yes, ma'am. Done. And Saboth, of course, is like, shit. So Saboth is someone whom similar stuff will go down, but now we get into one controversy which, for the Kenobi timeline, we have to tackle. Now, one controversial character from the sequel books was Mara Jade, and I know nowadays there's a nostalgia for her and the belief that everybody embraced her. But in 2002 and 2003, she was very controversial. And I remember observing the controversy of Mara Jade and just being confused, and then reading the books. I have to admit I didn't really like the character, because she verbally abuses Han and Leia all the time. Luke just stands there and just watches. And on top of that, there's the fact that Luke got encouraged to use the dark side. And the problem is we approach things with dark side bad, good side, light side good. That's it. Like, there's no, like, gray zone. You can't, like, use the dark side a little and then just say, well, I don't feel like it today. There's no temptation. That's not how the Force works, for the most part.
It's like a gateway drug.
Yeah, that's how George Lucas explained it. So we have Luke, by the Kiss and Killix conflict, using Force Lightning on his enemies. Well, that means he has to be... But Force Lightning is hatred personified. That means he's giving into his hatred. So there's something weird here. That's not consistent with the Luke Skywalker we all know and love. So this is where we ended up really confused when we were shaping the Kenobi timeline. When we got to the sequel era, there was that. We didn't really like the use of Vong, but we decided to proceed with it. And there's also the fact that Mara Jade became pregnant and decided to start siphoning the Force from her child to keep herself alive. And on top of that, Ben Skywalker is remarkably weak with the Force. He never really has any badass feats. He's actually kind of pathetic in the Force. So our oldest brother developed the theory that Mara had drained him of his energy, of his midichlorians, to keep herself alive. And there was also our oldest brother who said, when she killed a fake Luke, the voice of Palpatine quieted in her head. And Chris's question was, why? Why did... it's not the real Luke. Palpatine knows the difference. He's not stupid. Well, this was a dark side command he left inside her. But our oldest brother kind of saw it as... It's never that simple with Palpatine. He's very sly, he's very powerful, and it's a little boring to end it there. So, our oldest brother decided that... let's make it a little more interesting, is what he said. Now, the other thing is that Luke is not behaving like Luke in the sequel era. So now we have to figure out how to reconcile what's going on with Luke's behavior. And what we decided was that Luke was basically... That Mara, who, is supposed to be the Virgin Mary without being the Virgin Mary. And basically it was decided that we'd make Mara a bit of a villainess. And that she's essentially latched herself on to Luke with a Force bond. And from there, Force bonds wield enormous influence over people, as we saw with Anakin and Palpatine. But because Mara has a direct hotline to Palpatine's spirit, which is still not gone, we have to bear in mind that thing's still around. That means Palpatine now has a direct hotline to Luke. So that this is why Luke is using the dark side and using Force lightning and not really defending his sister or brother-in-law. And we also had to correct some of the conversations between Han and Mara, because throughout the entire sequels, she always verbally abuses Han. And Han just takes it. Han would never take it. He'd be like, fuck you, I don't need to listen to this. I don't need to listen to you. I don't... Han is a hothead. He'll lash out. It's something I love about Han. I cannot imagine a Harrison Ford character just taking it. So, there is that. And Luke, being out of character, yeah. So, once we
Can I real quick ask you a clarifying question? What did you say was overpowered again? About, I think you said something, was there a ship that was overpowered, in regards to the Thrawn trilogy and defeating Thrawn?
Well, what we had discussed was that the thing is, because of the Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy and Force Unleashed games, and the books and comics attached to them, Jedi are basically overpowered in a way in comparison, and even Luke is very overpowered. Luke should not struggle with a single capital ship, or 5 capital ships, to a large extent. And it's just... A Mandalorian might be able to stand up against a lot of Jedi, but an elite Jedi, the creme of the creme, the Kyle Katarns of the galaxy, the Luke Skywalkers of the galaxy, will never struggle with that capital ship. They'll just fly their ship in, land in the hangar, and just start slaughtering crew members and make their way to capture the commander. That's what they do in Episode 3. That's what they did do in Episode 3. That's what the Jedi always end up doing. So, this is where it broke suspension of disbelief on our end. So, we just figured, if Thrawn survives, he's probably on a prison planet and there's no way he's ever getting it all off of it. And that's how he spends the rest of his life. Done. Or he's killed. Either way, he's not important enough in the Star Wars universe to matter, going forward. And I know that's controversial.
So you're saying that, Thrawn is too weak, really? Or
yeah.
He would be in your version of having powerful Jedi.
Well, no, he's too weak even in the canon.
But in the canon, isn't Luke too weak? Because they're just not... They're not...
Luke is strong.
He's strong, but he never does anything, important, in my opinion. He doesn't decide to board the... Why doesn't he direct things? Why isn't he taking action? He's completely a reactionary character in that book.
That's the problem with the books.
And that is the problem. Big problem.
Yeah. Because Luke is a take-charge character. He never just let Thrawn go around bombarding planets. He just land in the hangar and just say, listen, Grand Admiral Thrawn, I'm here to take you under arrest. Will you please cooperate? Of course.
Yeah, I feel like he kind of just you have to set him. Maybe he needs some guidance on what he wants to help help him understand what the problem is, and then after that, he's like, okay, I'll take care of the problem.
Yeah.
But even after in this book, it's he knows what the problem is, and then he's just kind of okay, well, let the politicians figure it out.
Yeah. Whereas what we decided was you had 3 or 4 Jedi just went in to take out Thrawn. Luke, on the other hand, saw that there's something behind Thrawn and decided to go for C'baoth. And he took him out really quick. But the thing is, so we decided Luke cuts the head off the snake. So once again, it's Luke to the rescue. So that, you know, he's elevated. But the problem is the Mara Jade thing. That we could either just erase her from the story, or we have to kind of work with what the canon was, much to our unhappiness.
You know, I think since it's not a movie, just in my opinion, since it's not movie content, you can be more, you can edit it more. You can change things.
Well, we did.
You know,
edit
movie
things
canon is
in some
sacred.
way.
You can't change really you can't really. You're not going to try to change movie canon. Besides the sequel trilogy,
what we decided was she is Palpatine's second attempt. You know what I mean? To come back.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is, after that, you know, you've got a good chunk of the Yuz and Vong conflict that would eventually go on similarly, but slightly different. And the roots have stemmed from the fact that Ferrus Olin would die. He'd be killed brutally due to betrayal from within the Jedi Order. And he would perish on a mission to Genazzon Arbor. Qui-Gon Kenobi would go to investigate, find out Mara had her hand in it, and he'd get enraged. And, of course, he would basically just break off and go leave for the Outer Rim, taking what Jedi he could to found his own order in a fit of fury because he just wouldn't like what had been done to Ferrus, who was a mentor of his. But on the other hand, Vieira Feld would feel that, you know, Qui-Gon had kind of overreacted and would be annoyed that he didn't consult with her. On the other hand, she would have her security clearances revoked. She would be suspicious of the way Luke's behaving and confused by it and sensing something's amiss. So she'd basically tear off more of the Jedi cults and whatnot and go to the Mid-Rim. And the idea was she would find her way to the planet of Typhon. She'd actually almost crash there. And there she'd be reunited with her former lover, Zeru, from the Cult Wars, and she founds her own order there. But the thing is, there'd be 3 Jedi Orders, one in the Outer Rim, one in the Mid-Rim, and one in the Inner Rim, and Core. And each of them would initially start off tense with each other, because 2 of them are having to start from scratch. And it's not that the 3 orders are fighting with each other. They'll never actually whip out the lightsabers. But they just kind of have a suspicion of each other. Now, the idea would be that Qui-Gon would say, we need to keep to the old Jedi code. We need to keep to a lot of old Jedi ideas. Sure, we need to allow attachment, but, you know, he'd be very severe about things, like Mace. So, he would basically dub his order the Order of the Code, so to speak, and you'd have the Order, because Vieira's got the messy Mid-Rim, that's still a mess, and she's having to deal with a lot of Imperial remnants. She would favor more, you know, proactive stuff, and, you know, she has to fall back on Neva and the Mandalorians and other groups like that, like the Trandoshan. So, you know, there's more of a warrior ethos, so it becomes more about honor. And, you know, it's the Order of the Blade. Now, one other reason why we were going to say, even though Palpatine's kind of trying to influence Luke indirectly, the idea would be, however, Luke still retains some inner goodness. And there'd be several factors that would come in. One would be the influence of Leia and Han over him. 2, Bowen, and Kyle Katarn, of course, and others. Now, as for character relationships, we were thinking Lando, for one thing, would end up having his own relationship, maybe with one of Palpatine's exes, and Lando would actually father children. And we were thinking one of them would become a Jedi, because Lando should absolutely be favored and treated like one of the gang, not some mercenary guy who turns on everyone as a merchant of death. But the idea was Luke had a previous relationship before Mara, and it was with, ironically, a character I actually liked a lot more, and our oldest brother liked a lot more, Callista Ming. And Chris's idea was, since the line of Ben Skywalker was such a disappointment, we'll just give Luke a daughter with Callista before Callista is basically killed off or something. Well, actually, we were thinking she was killed off because you can't have a ex of Luke running around, and the child that would come out of that would survive thanks to a lesser Jedi, who would then proceed to go to bring the child in, and Kyle Katarn would intercept inadvertently just because he's there, and Kyle would basically send the child off for a little bit to the Junction 5 temple, and the child, though, would be named by Luke in a moment of clarity, Beru Skywalker, after his aunt, because we felt she needed honoring. But on the other hand, the character would take on the name Beru Manaza in honor of her mother later. So the idea would be, the Skywalker line is surviving in the female lineages of Leia and Beru. But the thing is, Kyle would often be asked to check in on the child on Luke's behalf. But because the child is being reared kind of in between the mid and inner rim orders, there's kind of that bridging point. Vieira's not on speaking terms with Mara because women all hate each other. But Kyle is able to kind of come and go between the two orders because Vieira really likes him, and Jan. In turn, Kyle has his own family because our idea was in Jedi Outcast, Jan was pregnant, so you have a Morgan Katarn. Kyle has a son, then he's got another kid, then another kid, because he should have had kids. And so you have the Katarn family that's also growing. And now that we've got all the legacies kind of started, Qui-Gon would marry as well, and he'd name his son Obi-Wan in honor of his grandfather, whom he's finally forgiven. And, you'd have a couple of other kids. Bowen would marry as well, but we were thinking to give him a more troubled married life where his first wife abandoned him, leaving him with only his eldest daughter. And then he'd remarry later and have another 2 or 3. His eldest daughter would have been named Revan Skywalker in honor of the ancient Jedi Revan. But Bowen would be firmly affixed to the... Bowen would be another one who'd come and go between outer, mid, and inner rim because he'd see it as the Order of the Core, as we started calling Luke's order. Bowen is still attached to it because he's attached to his brother, Luke, who is the elder. And the whole idea here was to set the stage so that we can explain why Luke is behaving weirdly during the Yuuzhan Vong books. Because in those books, Luke actually hides from the galaxy. He's like, oh no, I could go fight the Yuuzhan Vong, or I could hide in the core and just not fight. I'm too important to go fight. But it makes no sense because Luke's not a coward. He would never hide. He would never, dress Kip Duron down for actually leading the charge when Kip's doing his job. Kip did nothing wrong. He's supposed to go defend the innocent. And then there's the mission to send Anakin Solo to his death on a suicide mission. Luke would never send someone else because Luke would say, it's me. I'm going. All the Yuuzhan Vong recognize Anakin because the Vong recognize Anakin Solo. They barely even know who Luke Skywalker is. So saying, this was something that in that book they said, Luke cannot slip behind enemy lines. He's too well known. But Anakin's more well known than him. So, it's one of those things where the writers say one thing, then say another thing, so it's self-contradictory. How do you reconcile this? How do you reconcile Luke not being Luke? So that's where we were like, what the hell's going on? Luke is not acting like Luke. So, yeah. And before you ask, Chris, yes, we were planning the Mara as the wicked stepmother to Beru, who, when she would eventually become like a 11-year-old or something, would end up spending more and more time with her dad. And, her dad would dote on her, stepmom would hate her. So, it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarves and shit. So there's a Disney character in there. And yes, she sings. Don't ask me why. I just decided on the spot. She sings now.
It's a Disney. It's
go
Disney.
to bat.
Yeah.
Might go to bat for her.
Yeah. But the idea with Beru was to imbue her with her namesake's gentleness and Luke's gentleness as well. So she's not joining in too much in the fighting. And we would be involving Luke in more battles because we were thinking Beru was pretty much almost captured by the Vong, and Luke would shake off the Palpatine influence and rush into action because his little girl's in danger, teaming up with Kyle to do it because they're awesome. But the thing is, on the suicide mission, we were thinking Kyle would accompany because there's no way he wouldn't. He's Kyle freaking Katarn. He's not a coward. He'll accompany. But the idea was on the suicide mission where Anakin dies, we were thinking Anakin would be heavily wounded, but like he is in the book. But Qui-Gon had deployed himself along with his own team of Jedi into action. And the thing is, Bowen had also decided to charge in alongside Kyle. The idea is that instead of Anakin dying, it'd be Bowen Skywalker who would die. So we eliminate one of our characters to save Han and Leia's best kid, so that we get to keep Anakin Solo. Anakin Solo, though, dies on the operating table for 5 minutes, so you still get a bit of that moment with that massive wound in the Force, and Leia freaking out, and Luke not caring, and Mara getting enraged at Leia for breaking down. But in turn, Qui-Gon, would imbue some of his life force into Anakin to try to save him. Same with a few other Jedi, because, they're desperate to save this youngster. Anakin would survive, but he'd be, kind of needing a recovery period for, a few months. But he'd be trained in the ways of the Force on the Outer Rim and kept, behind that order's lines. Now, when the Vong entered the galaxy, they smashed a good chunk of the fleets of our Imperial Remnant and that of Pelion, and they also smashed to hell a good chunk of Qui-Gon's fleets, and Qui-Gon had to recover and do more hit-and-run tactics. And the thing is, because Anakin Solo can affect the Vong with the Force, that would happen, and battle meditation could be used against the using Vong, and so, the Jedi could start to regain the advantage. As for Vieira, her order was kind of the hardest hit, because the Vong at one point settled in the Mid-Rim. The thing is, the mentality Vieira would have at first is she would charge in when the Vong invade the Outer Rim and would see it as, I could take them, this is going to be easy like every other time. She wouldn't listen. She'd go on a map, she'd lead a large fleet, lose, and nearly get captured, but her life debt partner, the Gungan Gunnar, would die, saving her, which would emotionally shatter Vieira, who by then had mothered at least one son with Zeru, and she would actually not emotionally recover from the loss of Gunnar for a long time, and turn to drink to solve her problems, because, well, since she was 14, she's had Gunnar. Now she's 45, and he's dead. So it's like Han's loss of Chewie. It's but the difference was, the idea was, she felt the loss even more keenly because she was connected to him through the Force. And it was her impulsive, stupid military decision that led to her defeat. And the idea is, she just would not want to recover. And her Jedi Order would have to, her council would actually have to start making decisions behind her back and for her, because she's just utterly shattered. And her council would appoint Lorian Kenobi the temporary head of the Order, because they have to basically unseat her because she's not fit for duty. Him and a Nemoidian Jedi Master, whom I think was called Knack something, but Knack, in honor of Richard Knack, the writer of Legend of Huma, was a Jarkai wielding blue and I think green. No, I think it was double blue wielding lightsaber guy. No, it was blue and violet. That's it, blue and violet. Sorry, it's just my memory, because he's a character I'm mostly running on memory from. Those two would really manage the Order, and Vieira would, for a short time in the Vong War, not be fit for duty. And the Jedi would eventually send her away from Typhon, because they're you're interfering with things. You're sometimes drunk. You're just not fit for duty. Go away. Can you actually go negotiate maybe with someone else, like some of the other orders? So her council decides they're going to start managing a military operation. And they do a good enough job, but the Vong start hunting down the Jedi Council members. So a bunch of them start dying. Viera feels guilty, and this worsens her condition. But the idea here was that Han, who is grieving the loss of Chewie, would run into her, and Han and her would grieve together, and Han would realize he can't keep blaming Anakin, and go on the mission where he forgives Anakin, and he would, with Leia and Anakin's help, finally convince her to stop feeling sorry for herself. And Viera would get a report that Typhon had just been bombarded by the Yuuzhan Vong. And realizing what she's done, she would rally what fleets and Jedi of her order she has and announce, we're going in. Fuck it. And, and this is where we're going to show Luke's good side, where Luke's like, this is a suicide mission. You go out there. I can't guarantee your safety. You're going to die. Okay, then we'll die on Typhon. Charges in, breaks in, and makes it to Typhon. And she hunkers down, leads one land battle victory after another, and refuses to move from Typhon, seeing it as if Typhon is lost, all the Jedi are lost, because this is our homeworld. And this is where it basically becomes like a bleeding black hole for the Vong. They pour resources after resources into smashing it. Now, the idea is Viera would realize the Jedi are limited in their power, so would turn to the planet, which is a massive light side artifact, and attempt to do a bit of a force meld with it. Kind of try to draw upon its energy so that she could use that to power herself up and allow her to kill the Vong and sense them and whatnot. And the problem with this is an incredibly dangerous and stupid decision. It's impulsive because she is literally bonding herself a little to the planet. And the idea is soon enough she would start to be absorbed ever more into its energy, drawn more and more in. But this starts to kind of lead to the death of her physical body. So she's kind of screwing herself over and killing herself. But it's allowing her the power temporarily to help her people, her Jedi, the initiates, and whatnot. What we had also planned is that her first Padawan would have been turned to the dark side by the Vong, and Viera would be forced to kill the young woman, which would also, when she first arrives on the planet, and Viera would be heartbroken by this. So she endures a lot of losses. And the overall idea was that the Yuuzhan Vong War would last 1 year less than in the actual canon, because there's more heroes, there's more battles and whatnot. You have Mandalore, the Builder, who's running around with his massive tech operations and whatnot, and basically the heroes would win. And Mandalore the Builder would have his own generals and officers, and including a member of Clan Ordo, of course, and including a son of, a cousin of Qui-Gon and Lorian, because if you'll recall, their mother was Talanis Salazzar. She had a brother called Kev. Kev had his own kids, and the thing is, at least, the idea was that there was that Kev had one kid. That kid, would be a general, and you'd also have whatever. So you'd have their cousins, and a few of their cousins would die in the Vong War, as would Kev. And, of course, you'd have Mandalore the Builder's own cousin, who's a member of Clan Ordo, who would be a general. So, there's all these different characters, and you have Boba Fett, of course. And after the Vong War, we get into the Kiss and Killix conflict. During this conflict, Qui-Gon would take I don't really trust the Kiss or the Killix in this conflict. Both sides seem to be in the wrong here. Now, in that conflict, Luke was keen to just rush in. Viera would be disinterested in the conflict because by then she'll have healed herself, because a Sith would try to take over her body, and he'd inadvertently be purified and drawn into the planet of Typhon, while Viera would be restored, so to speak. She'd no longer be dying and whatnot. Yay. healing from the planet as well, because it liked her. But the idea is Vieira would say, no, my order only has like... Her order at the end of the Vong Wars only had like 400 or 500 Jedi left. And she's like, after 5 to 6 years, we have like only maybe 3,000 at most. Yeah, I'm not joining this conflict. This doesn't concern me. This is in the unknown regions, in Kiss space. Let them deal with their own problems. They keep coming crying to us. Let them resolve their problems for once themselves, rather than always coming crying to us. And what we're thinking is, Mandalore the Builder, though, would see this as a good chance to also test some of his toys and train some youth. So it's like, you know what? My kids need some war. It'll teach them how to be men. So, of course, he goes off to the war. He agrees to accompany Luke and them. But in the conflict, he dies. And the thing is, this would affect Qui-Gon strongly, because he'd lose one of his best friends. The Mandalorians would withdraw from the conflict to the anger of Luke. And, well, they have to elect a new leader. But the thing is, the decision would be that they would elect, ironically, an anti-Jedi Mandalorian who doesn't like any of the Jedi orders. He struggles to see the difference between the Sith and the Jedi. And he's a Clan Ordo member who comes in very, very much against Luke. And he's like, yeah, fuck off. I don't need you. You're just a Jedi. Your dad was a Jedi, and look what he did. But, he doesn't fully get it. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't understand the Force, really. And he kind of looks at all the Jedi and says, you're all on the same side, it seems to me. Which is not true. But,
he just sees them as all the same.
Yeah, he's like, you're all the same. What's the difference?
Is that racist?
Yeah, we'll say it's racist. He's a massive racist.
He's just a Jedi racist. He's a massive racist.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, he's a massive racist. But, now Qui-Gon, for his part, for example, takes part in the war after, and is just like, all right, we can butcher the Killiks because they're not for us, and they're of the dark side to a limited extent. Well, some of them are spared because But the thing is, when Qui-Gon sees Luke using the dark side like Force lightning, we were thinking he gets very nervous. But accompanying Luke on this mission is someone who's even more worried that Luke is using the dark side, using Force lightning. Beru, Luke's estranged daughter. Now, we had planned that she had been raised during the Vong War by partially others. She had gone for Jedi training under Kyle Katarn. She had been his Padawan, but she had fallen in love with Kyle's son, Morgan Katarn. So, the idea is, by now, she'd be in her 20s. And this is where we were going to contrast her. Where, yes, there's some of her mother's snarkiness in character, but there's also a bit of Beru, Lars in her, and Luke Skywalker. But we decided what would be the opposite of Luke with this daughter. And she's not exactly trying to rebel against her dad. So we decided she'd be someone who'd excel in a Jedi art that Luke excels at. Healing. She's a Jedi healer. She loves healing. She loves children. And, she spent some time studying under Rock and Oberon on Sipta and also on Enderan. And she had spent time with Kyle. And each of them encouraged her to just be herself. But the thing is, you also had Jan, Olivia, and also, Ron's wife, whoever she is. So the idea is she'd get, these strong personalities, but she'd be a much more, calm and quiet personality, almost timid. And the thing is, Kyle's son, we were thinking would be headstrong like Kyle and Jan. So he's a hothead. He's charging in all the time. But he's more powerful than his dad as well. So he's like Jaden Kor, whom would be his Jedi Master. Because why not have Kyle's best student be the master to Kyle's own son? There's a bit of poetry there. And so she, her and Morgan had a lot of contact with each other. And he's a few years older than her, so there's that, she likes the older man guy thing. So the thing is, by the time of the Dark Hiatus stuff, the idea is Beru is basically a mother of 2 or 3 kids by then. Luke tried to push her down the Jedi warrior path, same with Mara, while Mara tried to bully her and verbally abuse her into it. But the thing is, she's basically a trad wife. And once she got married, she decided she'd retire the lightsaber to a limited extent and just become a Jedi instructor and a healer, basically a nurse, in pretty much on Junction 5, which is for the Mid-Rim Order. So she basically returned to where she grew up and just wanted a relationship with her dad. She just, kind of preferred to just be a housewife and whatnot. So this causes a bit of a break because the father, under the influence of Mara and Valves, kind of, is like become a warrior, but she doesn't want that. Classic Luke would never agree with that and would say, do what you want, be your best self or whatever, but you need to live truly, you need to be a good woman and whatnot. And so this is where our idea was that Hiatus comes along, kills Mara. This causes some problems for Luke psychologically because now there's, that Force bond has been partially severed. Palpatine ended up fleeing into Ben Skywalker, and the idea is takes over him. And Hiatus, of course, is killed later. And the idea is, afterwards, Luke would end up under the influence of Ben, who has an even stronger bond with him. And this is where we're thinking Luke is drawn... Well, Beru, once she realizes... because she's been investigating alongside her husband what happened with Mara as well, because, this is a matter that affects the entire Jedi Order. The thing is with Hiatus is that Beru would sense that something had gone wrong when Mara died with her dad, and she'd be more concerned for him. And once she'd kind of confront Ben at one point and realize what, her little brother's basically dead, killed by Palpatine's spirit, she'd then, pull back and take counsel of her friends and her family, and then go and confront them, Ben and Luke herself. And the thing is, the idea was that Palpatine would basically mortally wound her in the process, because you can't have her, severing the bond between him and Luke. But the idea was that instead of having Ben sleep with a Sith lady, and that whole plot line that the sequel authors wanted to go with, which was weird, we decided we're going in a different direction. Beru severs that bond between Luke and Ben, and heals her father through the Force, but it costs her her life. And Luke, when he awakens, it's like from out of a dream or a nightmare into a worse nightmare. And the idea is that Palpatine, realizing he's not as strong as what he should be, would realize what Mara did and goes, oh shoot. But here's where, of course, Kyle and Morgan and them come along and catch up. Kyle kills Palpatine. It was Anakin Solo. Anakin Solo kills him because it should be poetic. It has to rhyme like poetry, like George once said. So Anakin kills him, and we were also planning that it was Anakin who had killed Hiatus, because Anakin Solo is supposed to be a great hero. So, he kills Hiatus, he kills Palpatine, and Luke, some of the Jedi are like, well, of course we have to forgive Luke. But Luke is broken by the death of his kids and decides, no, he can't even meet the eyes of his grandchildren, even though his daughter, died in his arms, just saying, I knew you were still in there. Luke breaks and leaves for Tatooine into exile without anyone being the wiser after his daughter's cremated. And once he arrives there, he settles into the old Lars family stead, which we were thinking, now it went to the Darklighters, But we were thinking the same people had chased away some of the Darklighters. And Luke settles in there and becomes a moisture farmer for a few years. And he's broken. Like, he doesn't want to come back. He's given over his lightsaber to Kyle. Well, he left it basically on the shelf. Well, you know what I mean? Like, he left it on the door sill or something. Took off for Tatooine. But Luke ends up deciding, to become a moisture farmer, because that's what his uncle wanted him to be, and thinking, I'm in exile here. I can't commit suicide. It's wrong. So I'm gonna start over where I was at 19. But here's the thing. He's over 60 now. What we're thinking is, shortly after he fled to Tatooine, the Kiss Empire suddenly collapses, and the Sith surge from the outer rim, from the unknown regions, into the galaxy. With our idea being the ones who pushed the Yuuzhan Vong into the galaxy and the Killiks towards the Kiss, were the Sith. And the Sith suddenly, burst on in because a bunch of the Sith had fled to the unknown regions after, the Exar Kun Wars, after the new Sith Wars. So why not have them suddenly appear like that? And they're invading the galaxy, and the galaxy is not prepared. Yes, Qui-Gon, Vieira, and now Kyle, who's now Grand Master, have all built up these massive Jedi orders with, more than 30,000 or 50,000 Jedi per group, or probably 10,000 for the 2 Rim orders. But, there's a good 50 to 70%, 70,000 Jedi in the galaxy. The Sith come in like a battering ram, tearing everything down, and then grab Coruscant before anyone can almost know what to do. Now, the idea was that Luke would only be dimly aware of all this. He is aware through the Force and through some minor contact with the galaxy, but that's only through drunks and smugglers and Mos Eisley, like Ben Kenobi before him. And the thing is, Luke, however, after about 10 years of the galaxy struggling, it's fighting for its every inch and whatnot. The orders are struggling. Thankfully, they're backed up by the Sith race, or the people who call themselves the Sipta people, who have members pouring into the Jedi orders. So that's a relief. But still, they need a hero. They need Luke Skywalker. And Luke, however, is disillusioned. But who should show up to try and kill him but his grandson, whom we were thinking Morgan Katarn had been an admirer of Mace Windu, because he was, this was Qui-Gon Kenobi's master. So we're thinking that him and Beru had named their eldest son Mace Katarn. Mace ended up, who's 15 years old by now, very powerful in the Force, but untrained and unsteady in it, rushes off to Tatooine once he discovers that, because a few people did know Luke was there. Mace, when he finds the coordinates to Luke, races off to Tatooine because he wants to kill him. He's an impulsive young man who's always blamed his grandfather for killing his mother. But Luke didn't do that. So he arrives to kill Luke. But the thing is, what he finds is that Luke is not prepared to fight back. So he beats Luke a little. Luke will not fight back. But it's when he goes to kill Luke that Luke says, "Hold. I don't want you to kill in anger. That'll turn you to the dark side. I don't want that for my grandson. If you're going to kill me, I want you to do it, without anger." So he takes away the kid's lightsaber. He easily overpowers him. The kid tells him, I'm going to kill you. So Luke goes Mr. Miyagi on him. So the next day he gives him chores. So if you want to kill me, you're going to have to do your chores first. Because, you can't, you have to work to earn your bread. So the kid starts helping out. Now, over the course of a few weeks, Luke starts to open up. Now, Luke's starting to get visited by the ghost of Bowen Skywalker and Beru and even Callista. Callista tries to convince him to love himself because she loved him. Luke struggles with that. So Callista eventually says, well, I can't make you and it hurts me to see you like this, so I'm going to just cross over. I can't, like, Luke, please, you have to live on. Bowen tries to talk some sense into him and whatnot, and struggles. We were also thinking Qui-Gon Jinn would visit him. And Qui-Gon Jinn visits him to convey wisdom and try to also talk some sense into Mace at one point. So the idea is these ghosts are visiting more because they're trying to help. Mace, though, eventually gets his lightsaber back and would want to kill Luke, but some of the local farmers have been captured by Tuskens. So Mace decides he's going to go do that first. He's got to go, save the day. The idea is, however, the Tuskens are being led by someone called Darth Krayt from the Legacy era. Want to bring him in. Luke, sensing that, fearing for his grandson, goes to follow, and it's Luke who ends up, arriving just as Krayt intends to try to turn Mace. Luke, grabbing Mace's lightsaber, engages Krayt in a battle and kills him. And it is then that Mace starts to soften towards his grandfather and starts to listen to him. Also because Luke, who's been guided by Beru and her spirit, because she can't see, she cannot visit her son because he is so angry he's not able to hear her, is what we were thinking. But her father is able to because he's not really consumed by rage. And, she begged Luke to save her son. And Luke, of course, would do that because it's his little girl. And Luke ends up trying to, after that, tell his grandson, you can't just be a hothead anymore. You got to actually think before you leap. And after the death of Darth Krayt, they start to bond together. And realizing that, because Luke explains, like, when I got angry one time and I didn't listen, I lost my hand. And another time, I also cost, your Uncle Lorian Kenobi his legs. And, this stuff costs lives and limbs. You can't keep doing this, kid. So Mace, properly chastened and realizing, like the two bond, and, Luke makes reference to what Beru would want. And, there is a blow up, they do argue, because the idea was to base Mace partly, I think, off of Danny LaRusso from The Karate Kid. But he does start to listen, and Luke starts to train him. But as he's training his grandson, Luke's starting to soften, and he's becoming that young idealist again. And he's also starting to joke around a little more. So the idea would be also that, however, after a year of living with his grandson, a message arrives from Leia. Now, Han has been captured by the Sith, and Leia sends for Luke saying, I need you, Luke. In a similar message as from Episode 4. And Luke, realizing his brother-in-law is in danger. Now, Han had been heavily involved in the upbringing of Beru and had not forgiven Luke her death. And that was something of a fracture between the two men, even though Leia wanted to bridge the gap. But the idea is that Luke, realizing, I love Han. I don't want him to die. And he's also encouraged by his grandson who's impulsive. And it's like, we have to rescue him. We have to help Uncle Han. Great Uncle Han. And you've got Luke. Okay. But before we go, Luke shaves off his beard so that he looks more like, he should. Races off, and the two find a ship in the hangar on Mos Eisley. A ship that's just so happened to dock because a Rodian and a certain hamster stopped by because they needed to refuel. Now, naturally, Luke does not want to step on board that ship. Neither does Mace. But, they have no choice. So they step on the Valiant Eagle. With Mex and Vlanton. And they go off and away to fight alongside the Millennium Falcon, rescue Han who is on Prison Planet. Well, actually, Uvu 4, we're thinking, to give a nod to the Jango Fett game. And when Han is rescued, he'd be surprised that Luke came to the rescue. And Luke, of course, would be handed back his lightsaber because Leia had kept it. No, wait, it was Kyle who kept it. So it's actually Kyle who would later give it to Luke. But Kyle would have also come along to rescue Han, because no one wants Han to die, as did Lando. So the thing is, the Valiant Eagle, though, is recalled to elsewhere to just help out elsewhere. But so Luke has to basically ride with a still healing Han, Leia, Revan Skywalker, because she's on board the ship, Lando, Kyle, who else was on there? Jaden,
Rosh?
No, I think we had Rosh elsewhere.
Okay.
Anakin Solo. Oh, there's also Anakin Solo, of course. But the one crew member who's not keen on Luke is Morgan Katarn, because he's still angry about his wife's death. Now, we were thinking he hadn't remarried, but, there might be someone else who likes him, and he's just reluctant because Beru, and he can't quite bring himself to get over her loss. So he still hates Luke. And this is part of this hate had been passed down to his children. Even though his father and his kids are now basically telling him, you got to get over it. You can't just hate Luke. So there's going to be that tension. But the idea is that Luke, eager to prove himself, will agree to undertake a very risky mission and to try to take out one of the Sith, one of the Dark Lords. Because the idea was we were going to borrow the idea from Tor that you have a council of Dark Lords and the Emperor over them. So Luke undertakes a reckless mission alongside a few of his friends who are all on the Millennium Falcon. And the idea was to set it up like the Ebon Hawk from KOTOR, so that this storyline will follow more like KOTOR, but with Luke and his crew, all on the same ship, because of course. Or like the Odd One in the X-Wing next to it. Or the Raven's Claw, I think in Kyle and Jan's case, they're accompanying Luke. But the idea is that, of course, Lorian will join them on this mission because he's got a bad feeling about it, like he always does. He's whiny. Now, by now, the Mandalorians are accompanying the Jedi as well. They've been fighting and struggling because the new Mandalore, though he didn't like Jedi, the events after the Kiss and Killix conflict and the conflict with the Sith had brought about a friendship between him and Qui-Gon and him and Viera, where he started to realize the Jedi, because the Jedi would save his life, and also, most of all, his daughter's life, and Mandalore the Builder's daughter's life. So he'd kind of say, I was wrong, over the course of the war. And him and Qui-Gon would even write a new code of chivalry or a code of honor for the Mandalorians. So this guy would become known as Mandalore the Honorable. Just as a side piece of lore. But the thing is, Luke and his crew, the Millennium Falcon crew, would undertake a dangerous mission to kill a Dark Lord. It would turn out to be a trap, and who should suddenly appear on board the satellite that they had been lured into, Bespin style, but Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon would engage the Dark Lord in battle, and the thing is, the Millennium Falcon crew would go to flee. Qui-Gon, though, we were thinking, he's like Mace. He had always felt more comfortable in battle. But the thing is, over the course of this mission, of this rescue operation, well, he came to rescue Luke with some of his Jedi, and his Jedi escaped, but most of them, a few of them die. He would reconnect with Luke, and when the time would come for him to engage the Dark Lord in battle, he would have a moment of sudden clarity and peace, and would basically, he would lose his connection to the pod. He would no longer be able to use it, because it does require you to be like a berserker, in a way. Like, you have to be able to reflect the dark side back at the Sith, because you feel more at ease in battle. You're a battle master. You're not, you're a warrior. You're nothing else. But Qui-Gon, because he finds personal peace with his kids, with his wife, and now the one thing he's never, like, him and Luke loved each other for a long time, but like brothers. But Qui-Gon has, there was a falling out of sorts, but now, the falling out is healed, the wound is healed, and Qui-Gon can no longer access the pod because he's no longer at ease in battle. He feels more comfortable outside of battle. So now he can't use the pod anymore. And this is something that Mace actually said is a possibility. You know, you'll either lose yourself into a pod and go insane, or somehow lose your connection to it. Qui-Gon loses his connection to it. This is in the Mace Windu novel, I believe. So the idea was to go the opposite direction of Depa Billaba. And Qui-Gon loses his best weapon against the Sith, and realizing what's happened to him, he decides to give himself up to save Luke, and he is killed. But the idea is, once again, just to harken back to episode 4, we would have a run, Luke, run. But Qui-Gon would, like the clothes and whatnot, the body fades, but Qui-Gon would cross over almost immediately. He would only access that technique to help Luke the one time. Then he'd cross over, because he never liked the technique. He never liked the idea of the dead interfering with the realm of the living. He's more like silly Tachi in that regard. So the idea is, episode 8 ends not with Luke in exile, not with Luke failing, exactly, but Luke's best friend, his childhood friend, like with Biggs, dying. And yes, a Millennium Falcon leaves, but they leave with the plans of the Sith within their grasp, the identity of the Emperor, which was a mystery until then, and they leave with the locations of all the Dark Lords. So the idea was this would have been accessed through R2-D2 and through the heroics of this Millennium Falcon crew. So, yeah, that's where episode 8 ends. I know this is the most controversial episode because, we kind of rode the waves of the sequel books and took a different angle to them because those books were very subversive in our view, and that's a problem. So we decided to approach it as though they are canon to an extent, but there's more to it than that. And it has to fit with the George Lucas morality of Star Wars. You know what I mean? It has to fit with George Lucas's vision of Star Wars. So Luke can't go running around using the dark side. He just can't. Not without feeling the temptation. But Luke would never do that. So, we decided Palpatine was kind of negatively influencing him like Anakin. But the difference is Luke was able to snap out of it because he's Luke. And Beru we'd kill off for her daddy. But the thing is, Beru now becomes a Force ghost trying to guide her father. And so that at the same time that Qui-Gon screams out, "Run, Luke, run," you have her, "Run, Daddy, run!" And, Luke would flee. But Luke is more important than Qui-Gon. So that, we wanted Qui-Gon Kenobi to die in this Neo-Sith war. So that Luke is the main character. So that now Anakin Solo will leave the Millennium Falcon crew to go become Grand Master of Qui-Gon's Order. Because it was predicted Anakin Solo would become the Grand Master of the Jedi. But we decided, Kyle's the Grand Master of the Core, who are displaced to the Outer Rim and the Mid Rim. But, to Yavin 4, really. But the thing is, so Anakin could not become the Grand Master there. Vieira's still alive. So why not kill Qui-Gon off? Because it's the duty and destiny of a Kenobi to die for a Skywalker. So Qui-Gon, it was always in the cards he would die for Luke. Anakin must become the Grand Master after Qui-Gon. So he now, because, the idea was that after Anakin had been taken in by the Outer Rim Order, the Order of the Code, Qui-Gon had kind of been grooming Anakin to be his successor. Now Qui-Gon has his own Jedi Council, and they all agree Anakin will be the next Grand Master. So Anakin suddenly, in his, at this point, 30s, almost 40, is now Grand Master of the Jedi. So Han and Leia are parents to a Grand Master of their own. And, of course, they're immensely proud and whatnot, but they have to, alongside Lando and Luke, the Star Wars boomer generation has to go save the galaxy. I'm joking. Couldn't resist that joke. We end on a cliffhanger with a funeral for a Jedi. Luke in mourning for, his childhood friend. You've got the Jedi just basically on the ropes, and you have 12 Dark Lords and an Emperor to kill. So how will, what will happen next? Will the heroes save the day? Will, I don't know, Morgan Katarn find true love?
Will Mex and Vlotten ever run out of boom
Nukes.
booms?
Yeah, nukes and stuff. No, they won't, but stay tuned for episode 9.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning into the Kenobi Timeline. I've been Chris Higgins. This has been the Brothers Krynn. Joe and Dan, thanks again for bringing this amazing story to us. But without further ado, we will see you all next time. Bye now.
Bye!